The first time Amara Okafor decided to end her marriage, she did not choose privacy, dignity, or kindness. She chose an audience. It happened on a gray Monday morning inside the soaring glass lobby of Ubuntu Meridian Group, one of the most powerful private corporations in America. Rain tapped softly against the tall windows. The marble floors shined under warm golden lights. Executives hurried past with laptops, coffee cups, and expensive shoes. Security guards stood near the entrance. Assistants moved from desk to desk with tablets in hand. Everyone looked busy. Everyone looked important. And in the middle of all that polished ambition stood a man in a Navy janitor's uniform, one hand resting on a cleaning cart, the other holding a damp cloth. His name was Kofi Mensah. Most people in the building believed he was just another invisible worker. Amara believed that too. She walked up to him in a sharp white pantsuit, heels clicking across the stone floor, her face cold and perfectly composed. She held a leather folder under one arm. Her lipstick was flawless. Her posture was proud. She looked like a woman who had already decided she deserved a better life. Kofi looked up at her quietly. He knew that look. It was the look of someone who had confused status with worth. Amara placed the folder on the reception counter, pulled out a stack of papers, and slid them toward him with controlled contempt. "Sign them," she said. "Before we go any further, tell me in the comments where you're watching from, and subscribe for more stories like this." Kofi lowered his eyes to the pages. They were divorce papers. Not discussed at home, not brought to him in private, not wrapped in sadness or regret. Just cold legal documents pushed across polished stone in the middle of a corporate lobby, like he was being handed a warning notice instead of the ruins of a marriage. Several people nearby slowed down. A receptionist stopped typing. Two young analysts near the coffee station glanced over, then stayed still when they realized something dramatic was happening. A security guard near the elevator looked away on purpose, the way people often do when they sense humiliation is about to become public theater. Amara noticed all of it, and she did not care. In fact, something inside her seemed to enjoy it. "Go ahead," she said, tapping the signature line with one painted fingernail. "There's no reason to make this harder than it has to be." Kofi said nothing. He simply looked at the papers, then at her face, then at the growing silence around them. At 39, Kofi Mensah was a broad-shouldered black man, with calm eyes, measured speech, and the kind of stillness that often made strangers uncomfortable without them knowing why. He carried himself like a man who had survived disappointments, without letting them poison him. To the people around him, he was a janitor with tired work boots and strong hands. But appearances had never told the truth about Kofi, because the man in the uniform did not merely work at Ubuntu Meridian Group. He owned it, the entire empire. Every shining floor, every secured office, every executive car, every boardroom, every division, every overseas branch, every contract, and every dream that ambitious people chased under its name all belonged, in one way or another, to him. But almost no one knew that. Kofi had built his life in layers. Publicly, he was a mystery. Privately, he was one of the most powerful men in American business. He had inherited little, worked for everything, and turned a once regional logistics company into a multi-sector empire stretching across shipping, clean energy, data infrastructure, health systems, construction, and international trade. His father, Kojo Mensah, had started with a single freight route and a belief that discipline mattered more than noise. Kofi had expanded that vision until Ubuntu Meridian became a name that governments respected and competitors feared. Yet Kofi had spent years hiding from the kind of fame that turned human relationships artificial. He did not want magazine covers. He did not want shallow praise. And more than anything, he did not want love that bowed to money before it bowed to character. So he kept his identity sealed behind legal firewalls, private trusts, confidential structures, and a leadership culture where even top employees rarely saw his face. The board knew him. His chief of staff knew him. His legal counsel knew him. A handful of senior security officials knew him. To everyone else, the CEO was almost mythical. And months earlier, when warning signs about internal arrogance began surfacing inside the company, Kofi had made a decision few men in his position would dare make. He stepped into the building in disguise. Not as a consultant, not as a secret auditor, as a janitor. He wanted to hear what people said when no power was in the room. He wanted to see how vice presidents treated security guards, how directors spoke to cafeteria staff, how managers behaved when they thought no one important was watching. That was how he came to live, part-time, in a Navy Building Services uniform, under the name that appeared on his badge, K. Mensa. That was also how his wife came to reveal who she truly was. Amara had not always been cruel. That was what made the memory so painful. When she first met Kofi, she worked in brand communications. She was beautiful, brilliant, and hungry in a way he admired. The daughter of Nigerian immigrants, she carried ambition like fire in her bones. She wanted to rise. She wanted to be known. She wanted a life large enough to silence every doubt she had ever inherited. And in the beginning, she seemed to love Kofi for the things status could not imitate. His steadiness, his patience, his quiet confidence, his habit of listening fully before answering, his refusal to speak badly about people who had less than he did. She once told a friend, while Kofi stood only a few feet away pretending not to hear, that being with him felt like standing under a strong roof during a storm. That was the woman he married. They had a small wedding. No headlines, no luxury spectacle, no billionaire rumors. Just vows, family, warm food, soft music, and hope. Kofi had believed he was making the smartest decision of his life. Instead, he had been setting a test neither of them fully understood. The shift in Amara came slowly, the way metal rusts under paint. First, it was embarrassment. She stopped wanting him to pick her up from work in uniform. Then it became correction. She adjusted how he dressed, how he spoke, how he laughed. After that came comparison. She began mentioning men with titles, men with offices, men with catered meetings and polished shoes. She spoke about them too often, and always with a careful light in her eyes, as if she were trying not to betray what impressed her. Eventually, one name started appearing more than the others. Tendai Mbeki, Senior Vice President of Strategic Growth. Tall, smooth, charming, South African. A man with expensive taste and the dangerous gift of making ambition sound romantic. At first, Amara spoke about Tendai like she admired his mind. Tendai says leadership is about taking what you deserve. Tendai thinks timid people stay poor. Tendai says I'm wasting my talent. Then, admiration became intimacy. Work dinners turned into late nights. Late nights turned into mysterious travel. Her phone changed. Her passwords changed. Her warmth changed. And Kofi, who had spent years reading corporate signals from across continents, recognized the pattern long before he admitted it to himself. One night, he watched her smile at a message she thought he could not see. Another time, he heard her whisper in the bathroom, "I miss you too." The marriage did not collapse in one explosion. It decayed in stages. Amara began talking to him as if he were an obstacle instead of a husband. In public, the disrespect was worse. When she passed him in the building while other employees stood nearby, she pretended not to know him. Sometimes she called him maintenance instead of using his name. Once, when a communications associate spilled coffee near the elevators, Amara looked directly at Kofi and said, "Can someone get this cleaned up?" in the tone people use for furniture. He cleaned it in silence, not because he was weak, because he was watching. By then, Kofi already had proof. Security footage, private meeting records, travel discrepancies, messages, hotel bookings. More than enough to confirm the affair between Amara and Tendai. And beneath that betrayal sat another layer of rot. Expense manipulation, back-channel vendor steering, misuse of executive travel, and a pattern of internal favoritism that suggested Tendai's moral failures were not limited to romance. He was using his position carelessly, and Amara, whether knowingly or not, was tied to some of the damage. Kofi could have ended everything quietly. He could have called legal, called HR, called his chief of staff, and erased both of them from the company before breakfast. But he did not, because some truths needed to ripen fully before consequences meant anything. He wanted to know whether Amara still had a line she would not cross. Standing in that lobby with divorce papers in her hand, he realized she did not. He looked down at the documents again. No support, no property claim, no negotiation. The filing had been written as if she were divorcing a man too insignificant to matter. Then he saw something else. A handwritten note in the margin. "Make sure he signs today. He won't ask questions." Kofi's jaw tightened, but his face remained calm. "Who prepared these?" he asked. "My attorney," Amara said. "Which attorney?" She gave an impatient sigh. "Why does that matter?" "Because I asked." Her eyes sharpened. She hated that tone from him now. Calm had begun to sound like disobedience to her. "Leila Adeyemi drafted them," she said, "and she knows what she's doing." Kofi nodded slowly. That name mattered. Leila had done side work for firms linked to Tendai. Interesting. "Of course," Kofi said. Amara folded her arms. "What is that supposed to mean?" "It means," he said, still holding the papers, "you've been taking advice from people who think power makes them clever." Her lips tightened. Then she delivered the sentence she had probably rehearsed. "I can't stay married to a man with no ambition." Around them, the lobby seemed to hold its breath. Kofi lifted his eyes to hers. "Is that what you believe?" "It's what I know." "And when did you decide that?" "When I got tired," she snapped. "Tired of carrying this marriage. Tired of explaining you. Tired of building a future while you mop floors." The cruelty of that line did not live in the words alone. It lived in the certainty. She truly believed she had been carrying him. A woman standing in a building owned by her husband, talking to him like he was a burden she had outgrown. Kofi looked at her for a long moment and said, "There's someone else." It was not a question. Amara's face changed for half a second. Then she recovered. "That is no longer your concern." Confirmation. Clean and easy. He nodded. Several feet away, one of the receptionists pretended to organize visitor badges while listening to every word. Two men in suits paused near the revolving doors. A junior assistant stood near a pillar, frozen. Amara knew they were watching.
and that seemed to make her bolder. "Sign the papers, Kofi," she said. "Take what's left of your pride and move on." Something cold settled inside him then. Not rage, not heartbreak. Finality. He slipped one hand into his pocket and took out his phone. Amara frowned. "What are you doing?" "Calling someone." "For what?" "To make sure this is handled correctly." That made her laugh. The sound was sharp and dismissive, the laugh of someone who thinks she understands the limits of another person's world. "And who are you calling?" she asked. "The CEO?" Kofi looked at her calmly. "Yes." That only made her laugh harder. A few nearby employees exchanged glances. Amara leaned in slightly and lowered her voice. "This is why I'm leaving you," she said. "You live in fantasy. You don't belong in rooms like this." Kofi tapped one name on his screen. Zola Adebayo. She answered immediately. "Good morning, sir." Amara's expression shifted. Zola did not sound like a receptionist. She sounded like command. Kofi said, "Meet me in the main lobby." "I'm on my way, Mr. Mensah." He ended the call. Amara stared at him. "Who was that?" "My chief of staff." Her scoff came too quickly. "Your chief of staff." Kofi said nothing. Instead, he folded the divorce papers neatly in half and set them on the counter. The elevator doors at the east side of the lobby opened less than a minute later. Zola Adebayo stepped out first. She was a tall black woman in a charcoal suit, carrying a slim tablet and walking with the clean precision of someone accustomed to real authority. Behind her came the company's head of legal operations and two executive security officers.
People moved out of their way without being told. Conversations died mid-sentence. Even those who did not know exactly what was happening understood instinctively that power had just entered the room. Zola walked directly to Kofi. She stopped beside him, turned slightly, and said in a clear, respectful voice, "Good morning, Mr. Mensah." The entire lobby went silent. Amara's face drained of color. Her mouth parted, but nothing came out. Zola continued, calm as steel. "Legal and executive security are present, sir." Kofi nodded once. "Thank you." Amara looked from Zola to Kofi and back again, as if her mind were refusing to accept the picture in front of her. "No," she whispered. "No. What is this?" Zola turned to her. "Ma'am, you are speaking to Mr. Kofi Mensah, founder and chief executive officer of Ubuntu Meridian Group." The silence broke in fragments. A sharp inhale near the reception desk. A whispered, "Oh my God." A dropped coffee lid rolling across polished stone. Amara gripped the edge of the counter. "That's not possible," she said. One of the executive security officers answered quietly, "It is." Kofi did not move. He let the truth stand between them without decoration. That was the moment Amara began seeing him for the first time. Not as a husband she had outgrown, not as a janitor she could humiliate, but as the man who owned the world she had been trying so hard to enter. He could see the recognition unfold in her eyes like a slow collapse. Her career, her image, her social ambition, her carefully curated proximity to power. All of it had been built inside a structure that belonged to the very man she had just tried to crush in public. "Kofi," she whispered. He met her eyes. "You did not need to know I was wealthy," he said. You only needed to know I was your husband." Tears rose instantly in her eyes. Whether they came from shame, fear, or regret, even she might not have known. At that exact moment, the revolving doors opened again. Tendai Mbeki walked into the lobby. He entered with casual confidence, coat over one shoulder, phone in hand, the expression of a man who expected the day to go his way. He saw Amara first and started toward her. Then he noticed the silence. Then he saw Zola. Then he saw Kofi in the janitor's uniform, standing at the center of a stunned crowd. He slowed. His smile disappeared. Power has a way of announcing itself without raising its voice. Tendai understood that faster than Amara had. His eyes moved to Zola, then to the security officers, then back to Kofi. His face changed. Not completely, but enough. The calculations had begun. If you like this story, subscribe my channel for more beautiful stories.
Tendai,
Zola said, her tone professional.
please stay where you are.
He did. That alone told everyone how serious this had become. Amara turned toward him with a desperate expression.
Tendai.
But he was no longer looking at her. He was looking at Kofi, at the uniform, at the cleaning cart, at the reality he had somehow missed while walking through the building as if titles made him untouchable.
Mr. Mensah,
Tendai said carefully. Kofi's face remained unreadable. Good morning, Tendai. The use of his first name, spoken so evenly, seemed to strike harder than if Kofi had shouted. Tendai swallowed.
Sir, I think there has been some misunderstanding.
There has, Kofi said, but not on my side. The head of legal stepped forward and opened a folder. Tendai Mbeki, he said, you are being placed on immediate administrative suspension pending investigation into multiple ethics violations, including misuse of company resources, undisclosed conflicts of interest, travel fraud, and conduct creating reputational and legal risk to Ubuntu Meridian Group. Tendai's face hardened. He glanced at Amara, then back at Kofi.
Sir, whatever this looks like, I didn't know she was married to you.
Kofi held his gaze. You knew she was married. That ended the argument before it began. Tendai's jaw flexed. Around them, no one moved. The junior employees who had once rushed past janitorial carts now watched with open disbelief. A maintenance worker standing near the side corridor had tears in his eyes for reasons even he might not have been able to explain. One older security guard stared at Kofi with the kind of respect men reserve for those who have endured insult without flinching. Amara began crying fully now.
Kofi, please, she said. Please don't do this here.
The words came out broken. He almost admired the irony. She had chosen here. She had wanted here. She had brought the papers to here. Only now that the stage had turned on her did privacy become important. Kofi looked at Zola. Lock the outer access for 5 minutes.
Yes, sir.
One of the security officers moved immediately toward the entrance team. The revolving doors remained functional for exits, but restricted entries. The lobby became a sealed chamber of truth. Amara noticed. Her panic deepened.
Kofi,
She said again, her voice shaking.
please, let's talk at home.
Home, he said quietly. You just asked me to disappear. She sobbed harder.
I was angry.
No, he said.
You were certain. That line struck her like a slap.
Tendai took a breath, trying to regain some kind of executive control. "Mr. Mensah," he said, "I would like counsel present before I say anything further." "You'll have counsel," Kofi answered. "And after that, you'll have consequences." Tendai's expression flickered. For the first time, fear showed clearly. Zola stepped forward and placed a second folder on the counter in front of Kofi. "Sir," she said, "the review packet is complete." Kofi opened it. Inside were summaries of everything: Amara's employment record, Tendai's internal misconduct findings, security logs, communication records, vendor recommendations tied to suspicious approvals, expense reports padded under false categories. Not just infidelity, corruption. Not huge enough to collapse the empire, but deep enough to prove that arrogance had infected too many levels of leadership. Kofi closed the folder and looked first at Tendai. "You were not caught because of the affair," he said. "You were caught because men like you always assume charm will hide appetite." Then he turned to Amara. "And you were not exposed because you wanted more. You were exposed because you forgot how to honor what you already had." Her tears dropped onto the marble counter. "I didn't know," she whispered again. Kofi's voice stayed calm. "That has nothing to do with why you failed." The words landed heavily because they were true. If she had stayed loyal only after discovering he was rich, then she would not have been good. She would have been strategic. Character that depends on hidden reward is not character at all. Amara covered her mouth and broke into sobs. Tendai looked away, as if her crying now embarrassed him more than betraying her ever had. That, too, told Kofi everything. He handed the torn, emotional remains of the moment to the law in a single sentence. "Proceed." Zola nodded. "Mr. Mbeki," she said, "you will come with executive security." Two officers stepped to Tendai's sides. He did not fight. He did not speak again. His confidence had cracked too fully for performance. Then Zola turned to Amara. "Ms. Okafor," she said gently but firmly, "your building access is suspended pending formal review. Please surrender your badge." Amara stared at her in horror. "My badge?" "Yes, ma'am." "My job?" Zola did not soften. "Your access." Amara looked at Kofi like he might rescue her from what he had merely allowed to become visible. "Kofi, please," she whispered. "Please don't let them do this." He looked at her for several seconds before answering. "You handed me divorce papers in public because you believed I was powerless," he said. "Now you're learning what kind of woman you became when you thought you were safe to be cruel." She cried harder. There are moments when guilt finally arrives in full, but by then it no longer saves anyone. This was one of those moments. Kofi picked up the divorce papers she had served him. He held them between both hands. Then, with slow, deliberate calm, he tore them in half. The ripping sound echoed through the lobby. Amara gasped. Kofi tore them again. Then, once more. White paper fragments drifted down near the edge of the counter like a quiet snowfall. "These," he said, letting the pieces fall, "will not decide how this ends." Her knees nearly gave way. A security officer moved discreetly closer in case she collapsed. Zola opened another folder and placed a fresh set of documents on the counter in front of Amara. The paper was crisp, official, stamped, prepared. Amara stared at it, confused through tears. "What is this?" Zola answered. "These are the divorce papers initiated by Mr. Mensah this morning." Amara went still, then pale, then visibly weak. "No." Zola continued, voice steady. "They include a request for restricted contact outside counsel, immediate marital asset protection review, and formal notice of legal separation procedures." Amara looked at Kofi like the ground had vanished under her feet. "You already filed?" "Yes," he said. "When?" "This morning." A broken sound escaped her throat. She had come to humiliate a janitor. Instead, she had arrived late to her own ending. If you like this story, subscribe my channel for more beautiful stories. The security team escorted Tendai away first. He passed through the lobby with the brittle stillness of a man trying to preserve dignity after losing the right to it. No one spoke to him. No one helped him. His expensive watch, his perfect suit, his polished confidence all looked meaningless now. Amara remained where she was, one hand pressed to the counter, staring at the official papers as if they might change if she blinked hard enough. "They can't do this," she whispered. Zola answered, "It's already being done." Amara turned to Kofi with desperate urgency. "Please, please talk to me alone." Kofi looked at her, then at the employees still frozen around the lobby, then back at her face. For a brief moment, the room seemed to disappear. He remembered the early days. Amara laughing in their kitchen over burnt toast. Amara asleep on his chest. Amara holding his hand at a red light. Amara saying she did not care what title he had as long as he was a good man. It would have been easier if she had always been false. But most betrayals are harder than that. They come from real love that slowly surrendered to ego. And that is why forgiveness becomes complicated. Because memory argues with evidence. Zola leaned slightly toward him. "Sir, would you prefer the executive conference room?" He nodded. "Yes." Then he looked at Amara. "You wanted this in public," he said. "The rest can happen in private." That was more mercy than she deserved, and perhaps he knew it. She clutched the folder and followed, escorted, trembling, stripped now not of money or comfort, but of certainty. The executive conference room sat beyond 2 restricted corridors and a biometric security door no janitor should have been able to pass. Amara noticed that immediately. Retina scan, fingerprint panel, silent private elevator. Everything about the route screamed power, and every step of it deepened her shame. When the doors opened to the executive level, several senior staff members were already waiting. Not a full board session, but enough. Legal, compliance, internal ethics, HR leadership, executive security, and Zola at the head of the room like a conductor of unavoidable consequences. Kofi entered first, still wearing the Navy janitor uniform. That alone unsettled everyone. A billionaire in a building services uniform walking into his own executive conference room was more than a surprise. It was a judgment. Everyone stood. He lifted one hand. "Sit." They obeyed. Amara remained standing until one of the HR officers quietly offered her a chair. She sat slowly, holding the divorce folder like it might keep her from falling apart. Kofi took the head seat. For a few seconds, he said nothing. The silence stretched. Then he spoke. Today was not a scandal. he said. It was a revelation. No one interrupted. He looked around the table. For months, I have been moving through this company in a facilities uniform because I needed to see whether our culture still deserved the future we are building. What I found was not only disrespect. It was entitlement, carelessness, moral laziness, and in some cases, predatory behavior hidden behind titles. Zola tapped her tablet. The main screen came alive behind her. Charts, incident summaries, complaint patterns, expense irregularities, buried reports, subtle internal retaliation cases, vendor conflicts, bias complaints that had been minimized instead of corrected. Amara slowly lifted her eyes to the screen. Her affair was only one fracture in a larger wall of rot. Kofi's voice never rose. That is what happens when leadership becomes mythology, he said. People start believing no one sees them, and once people believe that, they stop managing their souls. The head of compliance swallowed hard. The HR director looked sick. A senior vice president at the far end of the table kept his eyes down, no doubt wondering what else Kofi had seen from behind a janitor's cart. Kofi turned to Zola. Recommendations. She rose. Tendai Mbeki, immediate termination for ethics violations, misuse of corporate resources, conflict of interest exposure, and conduct damaging to the company. No one objected. Amara Okafor, immediate suspension, termination review, and removal from all communications strategy activity pending legal and reputational assessment. Amara made a broken sound. Kofi, please. He did not look at her yet. Zola continued. Company-wide ethics audit, anonymous grievance review, reopening of suppressed complaints, mandatory leadership conduct retraining, executive visibility reform, direct worker dignity protocol. That last phrase made several people glance up. Kofi finally spoke again. From this day forward, he said, no one in this company will ever be allowed to treat janitors, receptionists, cafeteria workers, mailroom staff, drivers, maintenance crews, contractors, or security officers as lesser human beings and still call themselves leadership. The sentence settled heavily into the room, because everyone now understood the lesson had been written in human pain. Kofi looked at the executives one by one. I built Ubuntu Meridian to be disciplined, he said. Not glamorous, not arrogant, disciplined. If any of you mistake titles for permission to become small-hearted, leave now before policy does it for you. No one moved. Then, at last, he turned to Amara. She was crying quietly now, not dramatically, not performatively, but with the collapsed expression of someone who had run out of explanations. Kofi, she said, barely above a whisper. I know I don't deserve it, but I need to say I'm sorry. He watched her. That word, sorry, can mean many things. Remorse, fear, self-pity, regret over consequences, grief for what one has become, and sometimes all of them at once. For what? He asked. She blinked. For everything. No, he said. Say what you're sorry for. That was harder. She looked down at her hands. I'm sorry I disrespected you.
He said nothing. I'm sorry I let ambition make me ashamed of you. Still silence. I'm sorry I betrayed you. Her voice cracked. And I'm sorry I was cruel when I thought you couldn't hurt me back. That was the truest thing she had said all day. Kofi leaned back slowly in his chair. You keep talking about not knowing who I was, he said.
But the real issue is that you decided I was only worth kindness if I stood high enough above other people. Tears slid down her face. I know. No, he said quietly. You know now. That line shattered something in her. She put both hands over her face and cried. One of the HR officers looked away to give her dignity. Kofi's expression did not change. He was not cold. He was done. After the meeting, the company officers dispersed to begin the internal actions immediately. Tendai's access was erased from every system by noon. His devices were seized. His travel authorizations were frozen. Vendor records tied to him were placed under emergency review. 3 other senior leaders were flagged before lunch based on patterns uncovered in the same chain. Ubuntu Meridian was cleaning itself from the inside out. And Kofi, still in the uniform, walked back through a private corridor into his office. The room overlooked the city. Dark wood shelves, art collected over decades. A photo of his father, another of his mother. Quiet power, not flashy power. The kind of office built by a man who never needed gold to prove he had won. He stood at the window for several moments, looking down at traffic moving through wet streets below. Then his phone lit up. Amara. He let it ring. Then again. Then again. Finally, a message appeared. Please, I'm in the parking garage. Just give me 5 minutes. Kofi closed his eyes briefly. This was the part no one sees when they celebrate revenge stories. Victory does not always feel triumphant. Sometimes it feels heavy. Sometimes the person who hurt you is still the person whose laugh once warmed your kitchen. Sometimes justice arrives before the heart is ready to stop remembering tenderness. But memory is not permission. He called Zola. She's in the garage? Yes, sir. Has she left the premises? No, sir. Kofi was silent a moment. Then he said, I'll speak to her. Security at a distance. Yes, sir. The underground garage smelled of concrete, rainwater, and engine heat. Amara stood beside a black sedan with the divorce folder pressed against her chest. Her hair was slightly out of place now. Her makeup had begun to smudge. Without the controlled perfection of the lobby, she looked less like an executive and more like a woman whose life had come apart too fast for pride to keep up. When she saw Kofi step out of the private elevator, still wearing the janitor's uniform, she froze. For some reason, she had expected a suit. The uniform hurt her more, because it reminded her exactly what she had insulted, exactly what she had failed. She took a step toward him. Kofi. He stopped several feet away. No embrace. No softening. No invitation. Just distance. I'm listening, he said. She began crying again almost immediately. I was wrong. He waited. I was selfish. I was stupid. I was blind. I let the wrong things matter. Still, he said nothing. That made her speak faster, more desperately. I thought I was building a better future. I thought I was supposed to want more. Everyone around me kept talking about status and money and power, and I started feeling ashamed. And then I kept feeding that shame until it turned into contempt. Kofi's face remained calm. Contempt, he repeated. She lowered her eyes. Yes. That honesty hurt her to admit, but he respected it more than excuses. I began to look at you through the eyes of people who measure worth by appearance, she said. And once I did that, I stopped seeing you. Not really. Kofi looked at her for a long moment. That is the first honest thing you've said since morning. She nodded through tears. I know. She lifted the folder slightly. Do you really want this? He looked at the papers in her trembling hands. Yes. Her face collapsed. I'll quit, she said quickly. I'll disappear from the company. I'll go anywhere. I'll cut off everyone. I'll do counseling. I'll do anything. The desperation in her voice was real. But Kofi had learned something painful over the years. Fear of losing consequences is not always the same as love. If you like this story, subscribe my channel for more beautiful stories. He took a slow breath. Amara, he said, do you know what makes this unforgivable? She whispered, the affair. No. She looked up, confused. It's not the affair alone. It's that you needed me to be important before you believed I deserved dignity. That sentence landed heavily, because there was no defense against it. She cried into both hands. I hate myself. He believed she might in that moment. But shame is not transformation. It is only pain looking in a mirror. You should sit with what you became, he said. Not because I want to punish you forever, but because if you escape this too quickly, you will learn nothing. She looked at him with swollen eyes. Did you ever love me? His expression changed then, only slightly, but enough. Yes, he said. Enough to hide my wealth and hope you would choose the man before the world around him. That broke her further. Then, why is there no chance? He answered with terrible gentleness. Because I already gave you the chance. You spent it. Rainwater dripped somewhere in the garage. A distant engine started, then faded. Neither of them moved. Finally, Kofi extended his hand. For the papers. Her fingers tightened around the folder. Then, slowly, she handed it to him. He opened to the signature page and gave her a pen. Her hand shook. She looked at the line, then at his face. Kofi. He waited. Please don't make me do this. He held her gaze. You asked me to sign in a lobby because you thought I had nothing. I'm asking you to sign in truth because I know exactly who you are. She cried harder, but after a long, trembling pause, she signed. One signature. That was all it took to end what pride, desire, and disrespect had already destroyed. Kofi took the folder back. Thank you, he said. The words were formal, almost merciful. That hurt more than anger would have. What happens now? She whispered. Now you go home, he said. My legal team will contact you. You do not come to my residence. You do not contact me directly. You speak through counsel. She stared at him in disbelief. You're really finished? Yes. He turned toward the elevator. Then she asked the final question. Why did you marry me? He paused. Without looking back at first, he answered. Because I believed you were a woman who could love a man without needing the world to applaud her for it. Then he turned slightly and finished. I was wrong. The elevator doors closed between them. When Kofi returned to the executive floor, Zola was waiting outside his office. "The town hall is ready for tomorrow," she said. He nodded. "Good." She hesitated, then added, "The building is already talking." He gave the faintest shadow of a smile. "Let them." The next morning, every employee across Ubuntu Meridian's headquarters received a mandatory attendance notice. No rumor, no explanation, just a company-wide town hall. By 9 o'clock, the main auditorium was full. Executives, analysts, receptionists, security staff, maintenance crews, cafeteria workers, drivers, IT support, legal teams, everyone. They whispered as they waited. Some had heard fragments of what happened in the lobby. Others had only heard enough to know that something impossible had occurred. No one knew exactly what to expect. Then the lights shifted. The side door opened, and Kofi Mensah walked onto the stage. This time he wore a dark, tailored suit. No uniform, no disguise, no hidden identity. The room stood instantly. Not because they had been told to, because truth had finally taken visible shape. He walked to the center of the stage and looked out over the sea of faces. Then he spoke. "My name is Kofi Mensah," he said, "and I am the founder and chief executive officer of Ubuntu Meridian Group." Silence. Not shocked silence this time. Listening silence. "For months," he continued, "I have moved through this company in a janitor's uniform because I needed to learn whether our values were real or just framed on walls." He let that settle. "What I found was excellence in many places. But I also found vanity, carelessness, disrespect, a dangerous habit of confusing titles with character." Some people lowered their eyes. Others sat straighter. A few members of the maintenance team near the back looked stunned that the man who had cleaned beside them was now standing under stage lights as the owner of everything. Kofi's voice remained steady. "Let me be clear. I do not care how much revenue you generate if you cannot treat the least visible person in this company with dignity." The applause started in the back. A cafeteria worker clapped first, then a security guard, then the whole room. It rose like something people had been waiting to hear for years. Kofi lifted a hand, and the room settled again. "This company will never again reward brilliance without integrity. We are launching a full ethics review. Leadership accountability will be visible. Suppressed complaints will be reopened. Worker protection will be strengthened. And every person in this company, from the boardroom to the loading dock, will understand one simple truth." He paused. "Respect is not owed to rank. Respect is owed to humanity." This time, the applause was louder, longer, more emotional. Some people cried. Not because of scandal, because they had just seen a powerful man use power to defend dignity instead of ego. After the town hall, messages flooded internal channels. Maintenance workers thanked him quietly. Junior staff sent anonymous notes saying they had never felt seen before. Managers who had gotten comfortable with arrogance suddenly became very polite. Within weeks, Ubuntu Meridian changed. Not perfectly. No company changes perfectly, but enough. 3 executives resigned before the audit reached them. 4 department heads were removed. Travel controls tightened. Complaint systems were restructured. Vendor reviews became transparent. And the story of the janitor who was really the owner became a permanent legend inside the company. People told it in different versions. Some exaggerated. Some whispered. Some used it to scare arrogant newcomers. But at its core, the lesson stayed intact. No one ever forgot what happened to the woman who mocked her husband because she thought he was small. No one forgot what happened to the executive who mistook charm for invincibility. And no one forgot the sight of Kofi Mensah, standing in a janitor's uniform, while an empire rearranged itself around the truth. Months later, on a quiet evening, Kofi stood alone in his office once again, looking out over the city lights. The divorce was nearly finalized. Amara was gone from the company. Tendai had disappeared from the industry circles that once praised him. Ubuntu Meridian was stronger than before, not because pain had made it stronger, but because exposure had. Zola knocked softly and entered. "You have tomorrow's agenda," she said, placing a folder on his desk. He nodded. Then she paused. "Sir, there's one more thing." He looked up. "The uniform," she said. "Would you like it archived or discarded?" Kofi leaned back in his chair and thought for a moment. Then he said, "Keep it." Zola nodded. "For records?" He looked out at the glass-lit skyline and answered quietly, "For remembrance." She understood. After she left, Kofi stood and walked to the window. Below him stretched a city full of ambition, longing, noise, vanity, hope, hunger, and human weakness. He did not hate any of it. Ambition itself had never been the enemy. Neither had success. The enemy was the smallness that enters the heart when success becomes the measure of who deserves love. Amara had not lost him because she wanted a bigger life. She lost him because she became the kind of person who only knew how to honor value once value wore expensive clothes. And that is why her regret became permanent. Because she had not thrown away a poor man and discovered too late that he was wealthy. She had thrown away a good man and proven that goodness alone was not enough for her unless power was visible. That was the real tragedy. And that was why Kofi never went back. He had built an empire. He could rebuild peace. But trust, once humiliated in public by the person meant to protect it, rarely returns whole. The next week, a new plaque appeared in the Employee Training Center at Ubuntu Meridian. It held no names, no dramatic explanation, only one line. Character is revealed most clearly in how you treat the people you think cannot change your life. Employees stopped to read it every day. Some kept walking. Some stood quietly. Some understood.